And they said because I did not have the skull opening and did not have any room for my brain to grow, that I would eventually become brain dead.
A SwitchPoint moment is a moment in time that fundamentally changes your life because of a connection you made with another human being. My name is Shawn P Neal, and this is the SwitchPoint Project. And welcome, SwitchPoint fans. We are so glad you are here today. And what a great story we've got today. I'm really proud to introduce you to Dorsey Ross. Now, Dorsey was born with a congenital disability known as Apert syndrome. And it's where his forehead was pushed outward, his nose and mouth were pushed inward, and his fingers, toes were fused. So he had no individual movement in them. And Dorsey is one of those people that just doesn't see boundaries. He just doesn't see limitations like so many of us do. And that's what we're going to talk to him about today. What is it that separates people and gives some people the ability to just move forward despite all of the odds while others get stuck? That's what we're going to talk about today, and I'm really excited for you to meet Dorsey. So, as always, let's take a quick word for our sponsors, and we'll be right back with Dorsey Ross. All right, everyone, welcome to the SwitchPoint Project. My name is Shawn P Neal. Today, I am sitting with Dorsey Ross. Dorsey and I came across each other actually on Facebook, interestingly enough, and I ran into him when he was talking a little bit about his story. He was looking for some opportunities to share it, and the more I read, the more I understood why. Dorsey, welcome to the SwitchPoint Project.
Thank you, Shawn, for having me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being on here. So you and I, we've already established that we're similar in age. I try not to tell people how old I am, so we won't go there. And just kind of let's start out a little bit with a little bit about you, because I know that your story started out with some things right off the bat that you were going to have to kind of live with and figure out how to manage throughout your life. So if you would just tell us a little bit about what that was.
Yeah, I was born on January 16th, 1977, with a congenital birth defect called Apert syndrome, which is a birth defect of the hands and the face. And when I was born, my forehead was pushed out with my eyes and nose were pushed back into my head, and my fingers and toes were fused together, meaning I had no individual movement of them. And back then they didn't have the testing and the technology like they do today to, confirm any type of issues with the birth and any type of issues with the baby. So my parents were really caught off guard when I was born, and obviously so were the doctors. If they, rushed me off to examine me and to look me over to see exactly what, I had and how severe it was. And several hours later, when they came back into the room to explain to my parents what was going on, they said Dorsey also has no skull opening and no soft spot, which most or all babies are usually born with, to allow the skull to grow and allow the brain to grow and allow it to function normally. And they said because I did not have the skull opening and did not have any room for my brain to grow, that I would eventually become brain dead, and that the best option for my parents would be to put me into a institution and to allow, just to, and eventually I would, probably die, and that the best option for them would be to sign the papers over and to put me there, and that they could, just go home and to, not have to worry about, their son anymore. And thankfully, because of my parents' faith and my parents, belief in God, they said, well, we can't do that. We're not going to put him into a, any type of hospital or institution. We'll just take him home and see what, God will do with him. And one of the nurses in the hospital, whether it was my nurse or another nurse that was in the hospital, had heard about my story and about what my parents were dealing with, and they said, there's doctors at New York Columbia Presbyterian Hospital that are doing operations on babies like your son. Why don't you take him there and we'll see, see what they can tell you and see what they can do for your son. And they did, and the doctors there said, well, we can operate on your son. He'll have a lot of issues and a lot of difficulties that he'll have to go through, but he'll, survive. We don't, we don't know for how long. We don't know what the severity of his issues will be, but he'll survive. And I had my first of many operations at 6 weeks to open the skull and to allow my brain to grow and allow it to function normally.
So this is 1977. This is a time where, from a doctor's perspective, the forecast looked kind of grim for you and your parents being faced with such a difficult decision. When you look back at that and that faith that you talked about that your parents had, can you tell me a little bit about, as you were growing up, how that deep faith and belief helped shape you into the person that you became?
Yeah, it definitely, shaped me and, helped me to develop into the person I am today. I grew up in the church, from birth. My parents took me, as much as they can every Sunday morning, and eventually when I got older, I started to attend the youth group at my home church in New York. And that was, definitely a safe place for me, was the youth group. Because there, they accepted me and they, loved on me, and they, allowed me to, to go there and to be a part of that group, and they never, really teased me. They never, make fun of me. They never called me names. Whereas on the outside world and, even in the school that I went to for people with disabilities, I would get teased and would get called, names like monster and freak. And, I felt, again, I felt loved and accepted in that youth group and even in the church itself. And I accepted, what in Christianity what we call accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior at the age of 13.
Wow. Yeah. So it really, it's I think a testament to what faith can do for someone. Now, when you think about, something tragic taking away someone's, ability to walk, ability to do something versus So like your situation where this was, from your birth, this was how things were. What would you say, because I think that you have a lot of advantages when it comes to being able to adapt and learn. What would you say were some of the early things that you learned how to adapt and do differently than, the other kids that you saw?
That's an interesting question because, I don't really, never really thought about, adapting in any way. I mean, I guess, I was part of growing up, my parents allowed me to figure out for myself what I could and could not do. And really couldn't wasn't very much. And what I mean by that is, I went out and, played baseball. I went out and played football in the street. And I was part of a bowling and baseball league for people with disabilities. And I guess the one thing that I can think of and I can remember, and I still do it to this day, as far as adapting goes, is with bowling. And because my fingers aren't, quote unquote normal fingers like everyone else has. I only have nine fingers, 5 on my left hand, 4 on my right hand, due to the fact that, probably didn't have the bone structure that I did when I was born to be able to, when the doctor was separating the fingers, they couldn't make, or they couldn't, have another finger there to make or to, separate. So, so when I'm bowling, and because my arm, both of my arms don't go up all the way and they don't go back all the way because of the limitations in my elbows and my shoulders. So they don't go up all the way and whatnot. So to put, my fingers into a bowling ball like most people do, I wasn't able to do that. And I even tried it one time, and it really hurt because I had, trying to put it back the way, everybody else does. So I adapted in the fact that I learned to put the bowling ball in my in my left hand, and just put my right hand on top of the bowling ball, and I was able to, bowl, do bowling that way. And I even, have a curve which, when most people see it, they're pretty amazed at the curve that I have, or had. I don't know if I still have it. I haven't bowled in a long time. But, that's one of the adaptations, I guess you can call it, to, when I was younger. And other than that, I really haven't had much adaptation. I probably would have to adapt in some way if I had to, get something off a high shelf or think of that nature.
Yeah, and it's, as you talk about that, it really strikes me, because we talk about, in the past it was called disability, and now we've really adapted our own language to say differently abled. And I think that, yeah, exactly. So what you're talking about is really a testament to when we remove those limitations and those limiting words, we can do whatever we set our mind to. We may just adapt to do it differently than someone else does. Is that kind of how you feel?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, definitely.
Can we talk a little bit about stigma for a minute? And what I'm looking at specifically is that I think, for so long, people have had a stigma around, someone that they see perhaps in a wheelchair, they see with, some type of birth difference.
Mm-hmm.
And what have you done, or what do you say to people who feel that stigma, that kind of bias, or that predisposition to think something about someone just because they don't look like them?
I would try to explain to that person who has that stigma towards people with disabilities or towards people with, who are differently able, that, for the most part, we're, just like anyone else, we have, the brain function, and we have the understanding like everyone else. Just because, I may be differently able physically, I have the, fully functioned, understanding that most people have. I may not be as smart, or maybe as maybe I may not have the be able to understand as quickly as other people, but I have, as much brain function as the other person, and I think that goes for most people who, are differently able, or who may have a disability.
Yeah, and as you were saying that, I'm over here starting to smile, because I'm like, well, I'm not the smartest person either. There are mornings I'm lucky I can figure out how to dress myself and color coordinate a shirt. So yeah, I completely understand. I think it's really amazing, because there's so many of us that get stuck in this kind of mindset that I can't do this. I'm not able to accomplish that. The world's against me and won't let me do that. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I didn't. And yet I meet somebody like you who you don't seem to really see those walls. You just see it as, I'll figure out a way to do it different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think that's inspiring. When you kind of look at overall, the things that you have done in your life, what brought you to this place of saying, I want to share my story with the world? Or is that just something you've always done?
No, that's definitely not something I've always done. Growing up, I mean, I still have it to a degree. Most people say they can't hear it, or they don't hear it, but because of, the way my mouth is and the way my tongue is and whatnot, I've had to deal with a speech impediment. And, even when I, make phone calls to certain people, I don't know where they get it from, but sometimes they'll think, I'm a female, or, they'll say ma'am and whatnot, or if I pronounce my name, they'll say a completely different name. And, when I go to Starbucks, sometimes Starbucks will ask you, your name, and I'll tell them my name, and, on the cup, they don't write it on the cup anymore, but sometimes when Starbucks will write my name on the cup, I'll look at them like, that's not my name. That's nowhere near my name. So, I didn't even have the idea really to share my story, or, in the way I'm doing it now. And probably that's probably one of the, things that I was limited in, was thinking to myself, there's no way I'm gonna, travel around the country sharing my story. And that goes into one of the times when I was older in youth group. I was a leader at the time, and one of the other leaders, looked at me and said, Dorsey, I see you, traveling around the country sharing your story. Sharing your story. And I, thought to myself, well, I told him, thank you very much. That's, very nice of you to say. And at that time, I really wanted to become a youth minister and to speak to the youth and to encourage the youth, because I really enjoyed that, especially as a leader, ministering to the youth in the youth group. And, as I got older, I went to, community college and went to Bible college. I lost my mom. My mom passed away in 2002. And I continued to persevere. And I finally graduated in 2005. And I went home and I went on several interviews to become to go into youth ministry, and nothing really was opening up for me. And finally, I was able to share my story at a outreach event at my church where I was attending at the time. And, just during that time, I just felt on my heart that this is what I wanted to do. And I felt like this is what God wanted me to do, was to travel around sharing my story. And that's how, what I'm doing now got started. I started that in 2000, in June of 2007. I started traveling around sharing my story.
Wow. And now we're 2022. Did COVID change things or allow you more opportunities to talk with people using the internet, or were you doing that before COVID?
No, and actually COVID really shut everything down. Even with Zoom calls or Zoom meetings, I really didn't even have that type of opportunity. I had a few meetings over the internet, over Zoom or whatnot, but it wasn't that many, honestly. In 2020 or 2021, it wasn't that many, because everything at the time was completely shut down. So when people say it affected everybody, it really did. It affected everybody.
Yeah, and we saw that one of the things that I have talked with several people about. They were high paid speakers, and suddenly the people that had hired them to come speak were saying, well, why are we paying you all this money to sit at home on your computer and do a talk for us? So it was an interesting time. Now you mentioned youth ministry, and one of the things that we were, going to tell people about is this DorseyRossMinistries.com. Can you tell me a little bit about the ministry side and what you do in that respect?
Yeah, well, I for the last 15 years, I've been traveling around to different churches all across the country. Probably at this point, about 300 different churches. And I just, usually come on a Sunday morning, and I just, for about 25, 30 minutes, just share, give a sermon and sharing my story through that sermon.
Wow. And so is that what you started in 2008, I believe you said?
Yeah, 2007. That's what I started, and I've been, for the last 15 years, that's what I've been doing.
Very nice. So when you think about that, because I know I've been on stages too and talking to people, do you have one specific moment that stands out to you that was like your favorite moment being on stage, or something when somebody just really moved you?
Yeah, I would probably say it was the time in 2013. It was just a random connection, really, that I saw this pastor. He was from California, and and it really never worked out, this way. Anytime I messaged a pastor, but there's one guy, I messaged him. I said, hey, this is what I do. This is who I am. And he actually messaged me back. and it's like, hey, in May, we have this, prom night type thing for people with disabilities. We'd love to, for you to come, be a part of that, enjoy that night, and then Sunday morning we can have you come and speak to the church. And that's what happened. I was, flew out there, I think it was Thursday night, and, was part of the prom on Friday, was able to do some, sightseeing on Saturday, and then Sunday morning I spoke to the congregation for that morning.
Wow. So how cool. I would love if we could talk for just a minute, because I think that here's the thing. I think that there are a lot of people out there who are struggling right now with that inner voice. And it's the inner voice that they wake up to, that tells them that they can't do something, that they're, like we said, they're not smart enough. They're not whatever. Would you talk directly to that person, and what would you say to them that tomorrow morning when they wake up, this is what you need to say to yourself? This is how you get through it.
Yeah. I always say, my thinking is, when somebody asks me that question, I always say, don't give up. Don't listen to the voices in your head that tell you, you won't make it, or that you're not smart enough to do what it is that you want to do with your life. That, don't listen to, so-and-so that's telling you that you're not going to be able to make it in college, or that you're not going to be able to get that job because you don't have the, the qualifications, or you don't have the, the smarts to be able to do that. Because I've had those voices in my head. I had that person who told me, Dorsey's not going to be able to make it in college. And, I've had those voices that told me, that told me, hey, the ministry is not going to last that long, So I would just tell that person, don't give up, and don't listen to the voices, whether they're in your head or whether they're around you, not to listen to those voices. We need people around us that are going to encourage us and going to lift us up and going to inspire us to keep going and to keep moving forward in what it is that you want to do for your life.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to take just a minute before we start to wrap up here to kind of dream with you a little bit, looking at, the next 5 years and Dorsey Ross Ministries and the speaking that you're doing. What would you like to see it look like in 5 years? What would be your dream for Dorsey Ross Ministries?
That's a great question. People have asked me that, a few times, and I don't know if it's just me not having that big enough dream, or maybe not having that big enough vision, but I don't usually think about that. And, for me, maybe it's, going online, and I did it once already, but maybe it's going online and having, conference calls or conference events where I'm speaking to people in foreign countries, or maybe, connecting with politicians, or connecting with different people like that, where I can have influence in what happens in, with people with disabilities and ministering to them and just, having different opportunities like that.
Dorsey, if people want to find you, what's the best way? Is there a website or a social media or anything?
Yeah, my website is www.dorseyrossministries.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that we put that in the description of this podcast, because what I'm going to ask our listeners is to go to dorseyrossministries.com. Look at him on there, find out what he's doing, go to your churches, go to the places where you think that Dorsey would be a good speaker and say, we would like Dorsey to come here, and give them the website and get this man to your church. That's my request for everybody. So
absolutely. And then also they'll be able to find my book and my podcast on there as well.
Excellent. All right. So everybody, please do that. Support Dorsey and the work that he is doing. And Dorsey, thank you so much for spending a little time with us here on the SwitchPoint Project. I really appreciate you and the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Shawn. I appreciate you having me.